Let's do it. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Great to see you. I am Maggie Tillman.
I'm Bob Tillman.
And I'm Molly Lomborg.
So, family team, winemaking team. And I know there are a few new members that are joining us tonight. We're very, very excited to have you. Very excited to share the new wines. It's a really cool lineup. We're introducing a brand new wine tonight that we've never made before. So we're really excited to get your thoughts on that. And again, we'll keep all of you muted. And at the end, we'll stay a few minutes past 6:30 because we like to be able to say hello and chat with anyone who's able to stay on at that point. So welcome.
And if you have any questions while we ramble on, feel free to throw them in the chat. Ivy will be there to help, and she'll help kind of prompt us to answer your guys' questions.
Yes, if we're rambling about the wrong thing.
Very likely, actually.
It's a guarantee. It is in fact a guarantee. I love it. So we are very excited for Emily's cheese pairings. We're always really grateful for her expertise. Emily's our tasting room manager and a seasoned cheesemonger. So if any of you were able to put together the pairings, I hope you're enjoying them. And we are going to talk about the new wines. We'll give you a little update of just sort of in real time in 2025, what's going on. We've got some cool stuff, particularly on the vineyard side. And then we'll cruise through the wines. And the goal tonight is to introduce you to the spring releases. So as members, you're getting first dibs before anybody else. And this is also a great opportunity to customize your shipment. So as always, you get to select the wines you receive and obviously add on any additional favorites and start with a little Grenache Blanc in your glass.
Here.
We're going to spend about 5 minutes chatting about Vineyard. So don't drink all of it, or if you do, enjoy.
Yeah.
All right, ready for Vineyard?
Bob's up.
All right, let's see what Ivy can show here. Okay, next slide.
There's Ivy.
So vineyard-wise, those of you that have been with us for a while know that we've been doing a deep dive into what's known as regenerative farming for some years now. Basically, it's very simple. It's just trying to make sure you have a healthy soil, one that is laden with microbiome, little critters that help feed the plants that are endeavoring to grow in that soil. And then to sort of monitor the nutrient levels in your crop, which in our case happens to be grapevines, and make sure that the microbes in the soil are supplying the needed nutrients, and if not, maybe supplement them through, say, a light foliar irrigation. So
what does foliar irrigation mean?
That means you spray it on the leaf and it soaks in there. Really,
perfect.
Yeah, and these sort of things is like, for example, if it's usually little metals that are involved in enzymes, and you might sorry.
A lot of words there.
Drift off a little bit.
Enzymes.
Anyway, you might need a pint per 10 acres of this stuff, so it's pretty minor.
You have to, the spreadsheets are a sight to behold, truly.
So,
to conclude that it's a pint, there's a lot involved.
At any rate, the one thing that we haven't been able to do in previous years is to get livestock onto our vineyard. And this year, ta-da-da-da, it's happening as we speak. I just came down the hill from the vineyard.
Sheep.
And we have 110 sheep that are grazing. They're in block 7, otherwise known as Anne's block, which is our Petite Syrah. And what they are doing is they are wounding the cover crop, which is all those grasses and broadleaves. Yeah, they're eating the top half of it, essentially, which will prompt the cover crop to go into high gear and try and regrow rapidly. And in doing so, feed all the biology in the soil. That's what we're trying to do.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So lots of vineyard, when you drive by, there's just dirt. There's no cover crop. And I have heard from people that there's concern of the cover crop sort of stealing the goodness from the vines themselves. Thoughts, feelings, insights?
Well, you almost have to look at every farming situation as it is. There's not like a solid A, B, C, but in general, if you don't have a cover crop, you do not have the microbes in the soil because they are fed through root exudates from the cover crop. And it may be in your farming situation, you don't want that, or maybe you cannot afford to lose the water that the cover crop might utilize or whatever. So I don't think there's any hard and fast rule.
Except
but on,
we're doing it right.
Alta Colina, a hard and fast rule is there's a cover crop as much as we can have it at all times.
You
Yeah.
can kind of think about it as also oxidizing the soil. And so in that process, it's also kind of creating a certain category of microbes to flourish that aren't always the ones that we want to promote.
Mhm.
And then I think just to build on Bob's point about wounding the cover crop, when these animals come in, not only are they fertilizing our soil through, urine and feces, but when they eat the top of
Poop and piss is
yeah,
what we.
nice,
Yeah.
nice way.
Nice,
But when they
yeah.
eat the top of the cover
are.
crop, it creates a root flush. And so we see, like, you can see these cross sections. The Savory Institute has this amazing view of like what a root structure looks like of cover crop or any plant that's been grazed versus not grazed. And you see like massive amounts of more roots. And as your dad is saying, roots are kind of feeding the microbes that we want. So the more roots, the more microbes. And
Yeah, and the microbes in turn feed our vines. That's the general idea.
yeah.
And as
So-
an estate operation, that dirt is a big deal.
So no, so here's the deal. We don't have dirt, we have soil.
Soil,
Yes,
excuse
please.
You
me.
are seeing dirt when it is bare ground. We have soil.
Yeah,
Yes,
Thank you.
I
Thank
am
you.
corrected on this
I was also
probably
a
3 times a
science
week.
major, so yeah. Nerd alert.
We're moving on from soil. We're going to talk about water. So we're coming off two of the best rain years in our history. Actually, we've been at it for 22 years now. This year we shifted from El Nino to La Nina, which means the northern part of California and the Pacific Northwest are doing just great, and we're kind of sucking wind down here. Right now, we're praying and possibly going to receive a miracle March, as they call it in the neighborhood. Just there's a rain gauge there. You can see a couple inches of water in it. That fell last Friday, I think. I'm mixed up the days, but fairly recently. We're sitting at about 11 inches right now. And we'd like to, at this time last year, we were sitting at about 18, and the year before that, we were sitting at around 28. So we're definitely hoping for more rain. And then the final picture you see there, that's Daniel, our vineyard manager, and our trusty crawler. He's pulling a fancy new mower that we bought. Part of the deal with trying to maintain that cover crop that we went on and on about is at some point it gets so high you can't really function in the vineyard. So we have purchased a really high priced mower, which will reach not only the grass and other cover crop that is in the middles, but it'll also go under the vine and get those. So we're really outfitted now, I think, to do like the best job we can even think of doing.
The mower's a big deal.
Yeah,
Who knew?
still writing checks on that. It's looking good.
Yes.
It's just hard if you think about it. We can mow in between the vine rows really easily, but it's under the vine row where it's difficult. So that's why a lot of people spray pre-emergence. So they'll just put a bunch of chemicals down to kill anything that could potentially grow so that they don't have to deal with it getting in the way of the vine. You can see in that picture on the right where Daniel is, in between us and Daniel, there's vines, but you can see the cover crop is growing up into
Yeah.
vines. And that can be difficult. And so a lot of people just poison the ground to avoid that. But obviously that's right where your grapevines are growing too. So you can imagine what that does to the grapes. So we have ways that we can in the past, we used to till the ground only underneath the vine row. But in our effort to kind of maintain ground cover and not have bare soil, we have now purchased this under the vine mower. So these are really unique and different, but it allows us to also mow under the vines while also mowing in between the vine row at the same time. So it actually cuts down a tractor path for us. Before we would cultivate under the vine row and separately we would mow. And we're always worried about, we're lucky we don't have super high clay content here, so compaction's not as big of a deal. But in trying to maintain soil health, we want to minimize compaction as much as we can.
Yeah, if you just imagine like stomping on a piece of ground until it gets really hard, that's compaction and that can be a problem.
And
So
thousands
minimizing
of
stuff
pounds of tractor driving on it multiple times a year in the same tracks.
does that quick.
Lots of stomping. Yeah.
I'm just gonna get creepily close to the camera for a second so I can change our view. We're 5 years in of living on Zoom and still I forget how it works sometimes.
I'm thinking that we should drink some wine.
Yes.
What do you think?
It's time.
I can talk about dirt for many more hours, and Molly can too, as I'm sure you're aware. But
Yeah.
Oh, it's a whole thing. Don't ask unless you really want to know, is my recommendation. Yeah.
So it's really fun. You can see tonight, we're actually going to be showing you guys 3 different vintages. So we're going from 22 through 24. So we have a couple of our fresh wines. We have a barrel aged white. And then as you guys are familiar with our barrel aged reds. So we have a really great lineup for you tonight. We're super excited, especially with that brand new Picpoul. So let's start with the Grenache Blanc, just because I'm already 3/4 of
glass
the
is
way
full.
through my glass.
Yeah, me too.
I guess I can just brief you guys. Do you want to start on the Grenache Blanc, Bob? And then I'll come back in with the vintages. Just so
Okay.
we can at least start
All right.
drinking.
So you can see the Grenache Blanc circled back there. We call it the back 40.
This is our very technical map.
Mhm.
I like it. It's beautiful to my eyes.
Beautiful.
Anyhow, the Grenache Blanc is basically a clone or a mutant, I guess is the word I'm looking for of Grenache, in the sense that the color gene in the DNA is turned off. It doesn't work, so it doesn't create color in the skin, and you get a white wine from this grape. There's a nice, beautiful, big Grenache-like
It is
cluster.
ginormous. The clusters are
Yeah, they're
ginormous.
big.
We
Like
have
a football.
We have 1.25 acres, and I'll swear we could almost bury the town in the fruit on that if we really wanted to do it. It makes a wonderful wine. This is something Molly brought with her 5 years ago by moving us out of stainless and into barrels for the fermentation, creating a much more elevated aroma profile and just a beautiful, fresh, racy, clean wine with about as many different fruits as you can imagine if you sit there and sniff on the thing.
Yeah, it's fun. So this is barrel fermented, but it's all old barrels.
Yeah.
So
Neutral oak. That is
Yeah.
key. So
Yeah.
with barrels, the longer you use them, the less influence they have on the wine. And so Molly's using barrels that have no influence on the wine, but because it's steel, or it's not steel, it's wood, it's porous. So air can move around.
So we get some micro oxygenation from that. And then because it's also, with Grenache Blanc, I use our regular smaller barrels, like a 60-gallon barrel. And so we ferment in the barrels and then age in the same barrels. So there's a lot of what we call lees, which is the sediment that falls out. And because we're in a small vessel, it kind of stays in contact with the wine. We also go in and we stir up the lees like once a week for the first few months. And that really kind of helps build that mouthfeel. So I think of it as like a cradle of oak, but you would never try this wine and go like, oh yeah, this is oaky. It's not your typical Chardonnay. But it's fun for us to have this kind of leaner, fresher, crisper white in our program. We now have a fresh Picpoul, but prior to that, everything else was kind of 16 months barrel program. But it's interesting. You'll really see the difference between the varietals with going from the Grenache Blanc to the Picpoul Blanc. So it's pretty fun.
This wine is dangerously easy to drink. So again, in 2024, so we harvested these grapes, 6 months ago. And so when Molly talks about our fresh wines, for us, those are sort of the quicker turnaround wines. So in the bottle, it's really about freshness, brightness, youthfulness. So both the Grenache Blanc and the Picpoul are in that category. And then we'll get to talk about our 12 o'clock High Viognier, which does see more time in barrel.
Yeah, and I'd say one thing to note too, with the 24 vintage was it was our second year of having rainfall. So that was kind of cool. It was a nice wet winter. It was just kind of this beautiful growing season. There was a really late frost that kind of decimated a lot of people's yields. However, Alta Colina, meaning literally high hill, we are above the frost zone. So, frost is cold air, which is heavy and dense, and it sinks low. So when we're talking about frost, it's really people that are in the valley floor. Obviously, we're not like Napa. We don't just have one valley floor here. There's a lot of dips, ups and downs, but we're very fortunate here. And so it was really interesting. I'd say the talk around town was going into harvest, even though we had had this really wet winter for the second year in a row. And everybody was looking at the vines at first going like, whoa, we're going to have a lot of fruit, because this year's fruit is determined by last year's buds. And so in 24, that fruit was determined in a cool, wet year. So we were all going into the season like, oh, we're going to have some yields this year. This is going to be awesome. There was this late frost. Almost everyone underestimated what what the damage was. And once we started harvesting, the majority of the people found the white yields were down about 40%. Alta Colina, again, we're above the frost zone. We've also been spending all of this time and money and effort on our regenerative farming practices. Well, we had the highest yield we've ever attained off of the vineyard this year. So
Wild.
it was funny. My husband was working for Tablas Creek, and he sources a lot of fruit. And he's calling me like, do you know anyone? Or he's, texting me, in the middle of the day, because we don't see each other during harvest, being like, we need whites, we need fruit. And we're like, God, we
We've
have
got
way
some.
more whites than we need. Like, we were like some of the few people that had fruit just coming out of our ears. So we were really lucky in that regard. The weird thing with 24 though, I think in Paso, we're always used to heat waves in July and usually a heat wave around Labor Day. And this year we kind of got through Labor Day pretty mild. But we got a heat wave starting October 4th.
It was
I wanna say.
bizarre. It was hot.
And it was really hot. It
Yeah.
was really hot. And so I think it pulled up. Most of the whites weren't affected because those were, for the most part, off, actually, except the Picpoul Blanc, which we'll talk about. But some of our reds, I feel like it brought up our harvest date by a week or two on, especially like Mourvedre, just because our vines, you're not used to that late in the season getting a heat wave. But I think the one thing we know is that we never know in agriculture.
Yes. And one of the cool things, again, being a state, but also being small, is that these wines every year are such a reflection of the vintage. So pour some Picpoul Blanc in those glasses. We're really excited for you to try this wine. It is a first. It's not a very widely planted variety in general. And the rationale behind us deciding to plant some, there are a few layers of things that motivated us and made us think like, okay, this is going to be a really great match for the site. And 24 was the second year.
Yeah, we grafted it in 2023.
Yes.
But we grafted it onto a portion of Grenache, so you can kind of see where it's circled red. So that's right behind our trailer pond. When we were looking at kind of our future projections and how much, GSM we wanted to make and all this stuff, we realized we maybe had a little bit extra Grenache. And so I'd been kind of like in Bob's ear, like, what do you think about Picpoul? What do you think about Picpoul? Because I got to work with it for 9 years at Halter Ranch and I just love this grape. And our whites have been gaining traction recently. And so we said, let's do it. So we took a portion of the vineyard. We actually virus tested it just to make sure that nothing was wrong. And it came out completely clean, which is pretty amazing for a vineyard that's over 20 years old. And then a friend of ours who farms down the road at Adelaida Vineyard had some great Picpoul. So we just got cuttings from him, meaning when they went to prune, we just said, can we take your canes? And so we got to take those and then we grafted those onto our rootstock. And I think we were all a little shocked to see how prolific these vines grew.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. In 1 year, we had a full-grown vine, basically.
Yeah. So here you can see Daniel taking a peek, making sure stuff is happy. There's also this cute ladybug in the middle because one of the benefits of regenerative farming is the soil is happy and so are the bugs.
Yeah.
The good bugs.
Biodiversity is key.
Yes. Yes. On the Picpoul, Molly can speak to this with much more authority, but among the things that is cool about it is acidity. And so the name Picpoul Blanc, I do not speak French, but I have been told by those who do that Picpoul means lip stinger.
Yeah, like loosely translates to lip stinger due to its natural high acidity.
Yeah.
And it's really cool because I think as we're all realizing that the temperatures are getting warmer, we're kind of thinking about what grapes are going to be able to weather the warmer weather, for lack of a better word or term. But it's vines that hold acidity. Those are the ones that are going to do really well in the heat. And so Picpoul Blanc, I think, is going to be something we're going to be seeing planted more and more. You'll see it planted a lot in like Texas, even, these hot places, just because it's got acid. The interesting thing with Picpoul is it's a really late varietal. I remember Bob, when we were planting it, it's like, so like, what can you tell me about Picpoul? And I'm like, well, usually big clusters, lots of acid, and pretty late. He's like, how late you talking? Like, well, we were on a different site, but like usually it's pretty late. Like I've picked it in November before. And he kind of looks at me funny. I'm like, but it was valley floor. Like, I'm sure we'll be good here. And this year, I don't know, probably the most asked question that you had for me during harvest was, so what's going on with the Picpoul?
Yeah.
Have you checked out the Picpoul recently? When are we harvesting the Picpoul? And literally, Alta Colina's vineyard, we're a state vineyard. We have all of our own farming in-house. Like we manage our vineyard very well. And there's a pattern that follows. The whites all get harvested and then the reds come. It goes in the same order of varietal every year. And this year, the Picpoul was the very last thing we harvested after Movedra.
Which is weird. All the other whites had been in for probably 5 weeks.
Yeah,
6
and
weeks.
it still only came in at 22 bricks.
Yeah.
Which is
Maybe we got it too early, you never know.
So it's really fun and different. The one thing that I love about Picpoul though, is I think a lot of times when you think of these like high acid racy wines, you think of a really lean wine, but Picpoul weirdly has body. And I think when you barrel ferment it, this was actually done in 3 neutral puncheons. So these are like huge barrels. They're about a little more than 2 times the size of a regular barrel. And we had 3 of those that went into this. And again, I think it just helps build on that kind of size and body.
What was case production? What did we end up with?
It was 125.
A whopping 125 cases.
Although I will say we did hold 1 barrel of this aside. We had 1 barrel that was kind of stand out, and we're playing around with the idea of maybe doing like a reserve blend of 1 barrel of each varietal for next year. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Maybe a white X.
There you go. Absolutely. For those of you that remember the X wine.
And I took some notes just for my tasting notes on this. So I got lemon meringue, white nectarine, floral, orange zest, wet rocks, minerality, and salinity. The palate to me had a richness. It's creamy, silky, with long, well-integrated acid, and delicate and tropical.
We're very, very excited about this wine.
This is a cooking wine. You drink it while you're cooking.
Okay.
I was like, please
Okay.
don't cook with this wine.
Yeah.
Mm.
So as we move towards our 12 o'clock high Viognier, I wanted to talk about acid again. So acid is a big deal with wine. And the way I think of it, as you can tell, I'm the non-technical one. So I have a bunch of dumb analogies that make things make sense to me. So with acidity, if you just think of like fruit, like a plum, a perfect plum is just the most delicious thing ever. If it's a week too soon, it is so tart, you can't eat it. And it's so physically hard, you could chuck it like a baseball. A week too late, and it's like gushy, sloppy. It's so sweet that it's gross. And so you want that sweet spot. All fruit, I think, all fruit does this. So when we're talking about acidity and planting something like Picpoul in the context of climate change, basically the way acid works is when a piece of fruit is born at the beginning of the season, all of the acid that will ever be in it is in there. So acid starts all the way up here, and that acid level falls over the course of the season. And as you get closer to harvest, the rate of the fall speeds up. So you're approaching a cliff, basically. And so when it's hot, you're worried about falling off the cliff. And so things that we know are really high in acid and good at holding onto their acid are cool for a lot of reasons. And I also like talking about that going into the Viognier. Viognier is a super expressive variety, big aromatics. And the challenge with Viognier is that's what we want. We want it to be expressive. And the only way for that to happen is to let it get ripe. But the cliff with Viognier is really steep. Well, a way. Ripeness is important. But maintaining acidity, finding a way to get a balanced Viognier, meaning there's that lushness, but there's also acid, is hard to do. And Molly's really good at it. And we have a pretty specific approach. Also, Molly did just take a photo of our intern, Josie.
She's down in Chile doing a honey harvest. She has her own bee yard down there. So I just had to take a picture of all of you guys watching her because she'd be so embarrassed.
Yeah.
Is Vineyard a word?
Bee yard?
Bee
Yeah.
yard.
Like a vineyard.
I love it.
Oh, I
Vineyard?
two separate words.
Oh,
but
okay.
yeah, yeah.
It's a word
Jordy
now.
always calls it his bee yard.
Okay.
I don't know.
This is what we call it
and
now too.
Before
Yeah.
it gets away, I want to just
Yeah.
interrupt for a second. Maggie, you just gave the greatest explanation of acid I've ever heard.
Aw.
Stab?
That was fantastic.
Love the
We got more nerds here than you think. You watch out.
Oh, it's.
Yeah.
I feel like they know.
I was gonna say, yeah.
This is not a
Not
mystery.
hiding,
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe the newcomers.
It's, I mean, yes. Yeah. For those of you where this is the first one, welcome to we're nerdy. It's nerdy vibes. It's part of the fun.
Yep. Yep.
So let's get into the 12 o'clock high. We're moving not only to a different variety, but also to a different vintage. So both Grenache Blanc and Picpoul are from 2024. Our 12 o'clock high is from 2023. And that is a winemaking choice that is part of why it's delicious.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I think 24 was a little bit more, besides that weird heat wave, but a little bit more of kind of a classic vintage where we had some rain, we had some heat. 23 was the coolest vintage on record for us since 2011. We also had a ton of rainfall that year. So it more closely mimicked 2011. But for me, it was the latest harvest of my career. So it was a later start even than 2011. Cool vintages are always
Forgot about that.
really fun. Yeah, it was super late. But I love, like, when a hot climate gets a cool vintage, like those are the wines you stock up on. Those are wines, it's cooler, right? So you're going to have more acid and you just have this longevity and life to them. And it was really interesting because, not to get too off track, but in 2011, I was working at Halta Ranch and over 50% of our program was Bordeaux wines. And if you made Bordeaux's in 2011, you were so concerned because we had a late frost in April and then we had no heat. And so Bordeaux grapes have what we call pyrazines in them, which is the flavor of like green bell pepper.
It's not cute in a wine.
Yeah, like a little
Doesn't
bit
taste good.
okay, but
Maybe
you
Brussels sprouts.
don't want too much of it.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting because that year we made a conscious choice to actually not bottle our reserve Bordeaux blend that year I think we bottled like 100 cases where normally we were doing like 1,000, but we just didn't feel like we had the quality to do that. But then when you fast forward and like 10 years later, those are some of the best aging wines in all of Paso, and both on the Rhones and the Bordeaux. So I always think that these cool years can just be amazing. So I would highly recommend, like, when you guys, as you start seeing 23s go on the market, especially the red wines, is like swoop those up. Because those are ones that you'll be able to enjoy for a really long time. But yeah, so 23 was just really different because it was our first year of rain. So it ended the drought. And it was really cool. So it was super, super late. But it was fun. And the Viognier this year, I think when we all tasted it, we were just like, our socks were blown off. It was, many times over the years, like for me personally, I feel like the 18, the 21, and the 23 are kind of my token vintages with our Viognier. And you can ask Ivey if we have any of those other ones left. I feel like we probably don't, but there might be some library offerings at some point. But this wine, it's just everything that we try to get out of Viognier. So we want those really expressive flavors, but we don't want there to be high alcohol and we don't want it to feel like syrup on your tongue. So I think when you smell it, you're almost like, oh my gosh, am I going to sip this wine and it's just going to be too much? Is this going to be something I should put on ice cream? But instead it's like soft and light and velvety, and it still has acid. It's long on the palate. We got the dried apricot, we got the peach pit, we got the jasmine, almost goes to like primrose. It goes so floral. And the acid is just almost salivating. So it's really fun. I played around with this wine, our whites, a lot. Those of you who are seasoned here probably know my approach to this, but for the newcomers, we have one block of Viognier. It's not very big. And I harvest it 3 separate times. I only pull about 1.5 tons each time. Again, just because we are in a state vineyard, it allows Daniel, our vineyard manager, and I work really closely together on these decisions. Sometimes we don't even have enough to harvest to bring a crew in. So just him and our 2 guys will hand harvest the 1.5 tons I want. But I make them all separately. So I do a really early pick where we foot stomp the fruit, which is what you saw our intern Josie doing. And so we actually foot stomp all the fruit and then we leave it in those bins with dry ice overnight and press it the next day. And then I do kind of a medium ripeness pick, and then I do a smaller late harvest, or not late harvest, just a more ripe pick. All of those are fermented completely separately, fermented and barreled. The Viognier sees no new oak, but it does get a little bit of like once and twice used oak. So where you get the cradle of oak, it's just a little bit more on there. But yeah, I think we were able to really unlock what we were trying to do.
Yeah.
It's really exciting.
Yeah. Maybe our best one. Maybe if I had them all in front of me, we can make a judgment, but just trying to remember, I think it's the best.
Yeah. Viognier is when they're good, they're great. And it's a challenging grape as a non-winemaker, just from a sort of a winemaking perspective of how to get the expression, but still keep it balanced and pretty. And
Yeah.
the 3-pick technique is involved. It is a lot of work. And
Yes, it is.
we've talked about this before. We sell some of our grapes to other winemakers. That's always been a piece of our business. It's just straight farming. And if one of our grape customers said,
Yeah.
I want you to do 3 1.5 ton picks, we would say, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Pick a day. Because it just, we can be as high maintenance as we want in the
Yes.
name of wine quality.
The logistics with getting 1.5 ton picks is very difficult.
Yeah.
So-
So we're it's a really reflection of our vineyard team, and we're trying to make the best wines. If it takes extra
So
work, we're gonna do it.
when Molly smells one of these wines, she can name about 5 things. If she's going slow, maybe 10 otherwise. But for me, you talk about apricot.
Yeah.
My goodness, it's like you can almost think of like an essence of apricot, but it's not syrupy or anything. It's just delicious all the way. It's wonderful.
It's the stone fruit thing is like classic for, if you
Yeah.
Google what does Viognier smell like, it'll be stone fruits. It'll be peaches, apricots. That's a mark of the right kind of Viognier. You're doing it right.
I need a little bit of cheese with that guy there.
Yes, we hope you're
hope you're-
enjoying Emily's pairings.
Yeah, the prosciutto wrapped melon with it does go
Oh,
very well.
so good.
And we did make about 140 cases of that this year.
We did, yes. So we are going to transition from the whites to the reds, and this is the debut of the 2022 vintage. So I'm excited for Molly to give you a bit of context in terms of what was going on in 2022. As you've heard, every vintage there's a thing. There was a frost, there was a heat spike, there was both, there was rain, there wasn't rain. Any winemaker, there's a thing every vintage, except for
There's like 13, 14 or just
Yeah.
classic vintages.
maybe like 21.
21 classic vintage.
Yeah, every once in a while. And so as we get into this, there are vintages, sort of these classic vintages where the weather cooperates, things are coming together. Those are vintages where the wines are going to be great. And I think it's even a bigger testament to skilled winemakers is when a vintage is challenging. And there are always great wines in there. And in a vintage like 2022, the challenges were unique. And Molly did an incredible job of finding the wines sort of in the chaos of that vintage. In 2022, you had to be a really good winemaker to make the level of wines that we're all trying to make in Paso Robles. And so we're excited for you to get into these. They are great, and it's because Molly is really good at it.
And I would add to that, you got to be one tough vineyard guy too,
Yeah.
because you're harvesting at 2 o'clock in the morning in
Yep.
95-degree heat
Yeah,
to try and avoid the 113 at 3
Yeah.
o'clock in the afternoon. So
which
yeah,
isn't normal, but again,
yeah,
every vintage has a thing.
Yeah.
definitely a thing.
Yeah. So bringing in, that's very nice. Thank you. But as I was talking about 23, right? We had all this rain. It had ended the drought. It was cool. It was late. If you could think about the complete opposite, that's what 22 would be. So it was the earliest harvest of my career.
By a lot.
By a lot, just to put it into perspective. So I actually had my second baby in 2022. I had a little boy in March, and I came back full time in July. We had a bottling July 21st. So it was kind of like hit the ground running, get through this
Welcome back.
bottling. And about a week later, Daniel, our vineyard manager, is like, should we sample the Grenache Blanc for sparkling? I'm like, Daniel, it's July. And he's like, yeah, no, like, I think we should check it. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. Like when you have time, like you don't have to rush, at this point, we literally had not even taken one piece of our harvest equipment out to start doing maintenance on it. Like we hadn't cleaned a bin,
Like our seasonal folks, our interns, they were starting
a
in a
month
month.
later. Yeah. Like I was like, dude, I just finished a bottling, like, whew. And sure enough, we kind of missed our sparkling date by a few days, and we picked it on August 4th,
Which is crazy.
which is insane.
Yeah.
After that year, I vowed never to bottle in July again. So we've now moved that bottling up to May, just so that this problem never happened. Because we were so in shock. The wine came out great, but even picking it August 4th, it was probably like a half a brick higher. Like we could have got it 4 days before that.
And it was everyone. Like that whole vintage, everyone was just like, oh shit. Let's go.
None of us were ready. We were like,
Yeah.
what the heck?
Like we're doing this.
Okay, let's roll. And like we picked our last grape in 22 by the time we had picked like 10% of our grapes from 23.
Yeah.
Like just to like give you the stark contrast. So we were at the end of our drought, right? So we had a multi-year drought. And then we had just a really hot growing season. So we call growing degree days, but it's like a heat accumulation. So we had a lot of those, which caused the early harvest. But then August 31st, we got I don't know how much the country got this, but California got wrecked by this heat dome. They didn't even call it a heat wave. It was a heat dome.
Like a new word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like with atmospheric river, that's also a new word.
Yeah.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
have to come up with a new category.
New weather words.
Yeah.
Terrible weather. Yeah.
But it was wild. As Bob mentioned, we were in it for about 10 days. We had our daytime temperatures above 110. We were seeing 112, 113.
Crazy.
But then the craziest thing was that our nights weren't cooling. And that was difficult for us. So we always talk about our proximity to the Pacific Ocean and how that really helps us, because year round, we have 30 to 50 degree diurnal temperature swings. Like it'll be 80 degrees in the day and 30 at night.
Yeah.
It'll be 100 in the day and 50 at night.
Yep.
So it really allows those vines to kind of relax and calm down. And in 22, like literally Daniel, our vineyard manager, sent me a picture at 3 a.m. harvesting, and the truck thermometer read 93 degrees. Like it was just wild. We were all scrambling, and yeah, it's funny. Like 2021, the wines just like made themselves. Like it was so easy, and I feel like 2022 just became this like vintage of like perseverance and resilience. Like we were thrown so many challenges at us as winemakers that it was like, what is it? The dip, dodge, duck, dive, or dodgeball or whatever. That's like what we were dealing with. We're like, what do we do next? How do we handle this new thing we've never seen? But we fared really well at Alta Colina. I had friends calling me being like, oh my God, Molly, what do? I have a fermentation and the VA is at this. People were sticking ferments, and I'm like, that's the highest VA, volatile acidity.
VA is bad.
Bad. It's like vinegar.
It means vinegar.
And they're like, I'm like, that's the highest level I've ever heard of. And then it was like 3 days later, someone else calls with like double the VA. And I'm like, is it vinegar? Like, is that even possible? And like people that were sourcing fruit were in a way worse spot, because this was coming in from the vineyard, because it was occurring, because it didn't matter how much water you put on, like it was just too hot for the vines.
Yeah.
We got really lucky here, because even though it's hot at night, we pick that fruit at night, it's down the hill at the winery, and we're processing next thing in the morning and getting it cold, so if you were buying fruit from someone that was harvesting maybe in the night, maybe in the day, and then you had to drive an hour to get the fruit and it sat out in the field,
Yeah.
by the time you got it back to your winery, it was already fermenting.
You don't want your
know?
grapes to be like hot tub temperature.
No.
That is not what we want. We want
No.
it to be ice
Cold.
bath
Yeah,
temperature.
yeah. Yeah. So we fared a lot better here. Most people had like crazy stuck fermentations, and we didn't quite have that same problem here, thankfully. But it was really interesting. I think originally I was like really worried about how the wines were going to turn out, just because I like to think of the vines as my babies, right? And when they have a stressful situation, like a heat dome, it's never easy for them, but vines are so resilient, right? Like people grow vines on rock piles, it's like they can persevere. And as winemakers, we can persevere. And the wines ended up showing this really beautiful elegance to them. Like coming back to them and revisiting all the wines, like I'm just so happy with the way that they turned out. And I think you can kind of taste that they had to work a little harder in 22.
Yep. It's so with this GSM, GSM is one of our very core wines. This is something we knew we were going to make when we bought this piece of property. Sorry, Bob is petting the dog.
Yeah.
Funny.
I saw people hold their cat up. I have to
Yeah.
explain. I have an 85-pound German Shepherd
Yeah.
demanding I pet her down here.
When you hear the tags, that's the dog.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a dog.
Yeah. It's very, very formal around here.
Yeah.
Super professional.
Super
Yeah.
professional. Yes. So with our GSM, one of the things that led us to
Oh,
this
there's a
piece of
dog too.
property.
All right.
Yes.
Love it.
Yes. Oh,
Cute
it's a cute
doggy.
dog. That cat
Another
is
one.
really
Oh
cute,
my
too.
goodness.
Oh, this is the
Another one.
They're
best.
everywhere.
This is the
They're
best.
everywhere.
No cat butts yet. But
I can't lift Honey up. She's
No,
way,
she's
way
too
too
big.
big.
She's too
Yeah.
big.
Oh, and another one. Oh God. They're everywhere.
So with our 2022 GSM, we made 200 or
Another
320
one.
cases.
Oh my.
This is the best. Oh, and waving, you guys.
These dogs, they're beautiful. There's some cats in there too.
Truly.
Oh my
We'll try to show you Honey later. But it'll involve moving the computer. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, it's a deal.
So again, our wines are always a reflection of the vintage. And when it comes to our blends, like if you lined up 10 years of our GSM,
There she
the blend
is.
is there. She
Oh,
is.
perfect timing, honey. You knew
She's
it.
weirdly, I don't know if you can see, but there's a bee in that photo, sort of in the left quadrant. She's obsessed with bees and she likes to eat them.
She's a bee eater.
She snaps them.
She's
Yeah.
a bee eater.
We don't
So
bring
she's
her to the
looking-
bee yard.
No,
Bee
no,
yard.
she would
Yeah.
wreak havoc.
Yeah.
She's not allowed.
She's looking longingly at a bee, which she's a weird animal.
Mm.
She's eccentric,
Love it.
So the blends are never the same. We're never following a recipe for this wine. It's always, which it would be easier for you to be like, Molly, here's the recipe. We're always like, make the best one, which is certainly a lot more open-ended, but the result is always wonderful.
Cat smelling.
Oh, there's a cat.
Oh
get-
my
yeah.
God, you guys.
Smell, sniff, or whatever hell I forget the deal.
The best. The best. So the way the blend came together on this, it's 45% Grenache, 35% Syrah, 20% Mourvedre. And again, any of these bottles you have in your cellar, we always tell you the breakdown on the back because it's interesting and
Yeah.
it really dictates the final product and bottle. And it really is like, if you ever see one of our GSMs and you think, man, there's really a lot of that, or man, there's really not much of that, call us and we'll explain what was going on in the vineyard that sort of drove us to that final product. That
Yeah.
was an incoherent thing. Sorry, I lost the thread.
But also we just, I never look at varietal percentages with this wine. It's always taking all the components and just blending what's the most delicious wine. I always ideally want it to be Grenache forward. And usually it just ends up that way by nature. But it's a more medium bodied wine. I'm thinking food friendly, right? Like I want that acid. I want the fruity characteristics. I want to have some tannins, but not too much. And I want it to be like long, clean, and super complex on the nose and the palate. So really layered. It's the hardest wine to blend because a lot of our wines are terroir driven, right? Like our old 900s from one block. Sure, I picked that 3 different times and I have different vessels that go into that. It's not that I just say everything I picked there is going into it, but it's like my puzzle pieces that I have are limited. So you're doing like a 30-piece puzzle, you know, and then when you get to GSM, it's like,
A 90-piece.
yeah, now we just stepped into like the big leagues. It's like going from doing anyways, I'm not as good as analogies as you are, so I'm not even gonna go there, but it's a lot harder. Let's just say I have a lot more jigsaw puzzles. And with blending, it's so interesting. But A plus B just does not always equal C. You could take your favorite Grenache, your favorite Syrah, and your favorite Mourvedre and put them together and it tastes terrible.
Yeah.
And so this wine is like, I just keep having to go back and go back and go back. I rarely ever get this blend right on the first few tries, even the first day of blending. So it's a lot of thought goes into it. But it's a really fun wine. So complex and layered. My notes for this one was a lot of cherry fruit leather and strawberry and luscious velvety tannins with some really cool like earth tones and herbaceous notes.
In our GSM, this is the wine. If I know I'm going to a great restaurant for dinner, but I don't know what I'm going to order, this is the wine that I take. It can hang with a bigger, more intense meal. You can have it with a ribeye or whatever. Or if you want to go a different direction, it's really versatile in terms of what you can pair it with. So like when in doubt, GSM.
Yeah. And I always tell people too, like when you're in a restaurant and one person's ordering chicken, someone's having fish and someone's having steak, and you're trying to order a bottle of wine for the table, ask your som if they have any Rhone blends.
Yeah.
You know, because that's actually going to be able to withstand all of it. Both domestic or actually, you know, from the Rhone in France. And usually the cost savings on it is pretty decent compared to like a big cab that you're going to buy.
Yep. Absolutely.
I would draw your attention to the mouth on kind of the finish on this wine. It's really rich. Yeah, it has sort of a creamy element to it, and the tannins are just soft as they can be.
It's really pretty.
It tells you something about those 100-degree days and everything, but man, does it taste good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really interesting just to make note, like a lot of people think of Grenache as this like light, soft grape because a lot of the wines made from Grenache kind of end up like that. It's actually a grape that has very low color content, but super high tannins.
Yeah.
And so when this wine isn't made properly, it's kind of a really soft, weak entrance with just tannins that rip your tongue off.
Yeah.
And so it's so unbalanced, you know? And so our key is always trying to like keep the right balance of tannins for the size of the wine. Syrah kind of, so it's like Grenache has low color and high tannins. Mourvedre's got like medium color and low tannins. And then you have Syrah that's kind of a little bit of tannins and a little bit of color as like your backbone. So the three of them just like create, if you think about Tetris, it would like go together and make a nice square.
I'm taking that analogy.
Yeah, I like
gonna
it.
go in the back
I
I
pocket.
like it. That's
Yeah.
a good one.
Yeah.
So yeah, our goal is just to create a delicious, lovely blend.
Yeah, you did it. You did it.
Absolutely.
It's a lovely wine, actually.
Yeah.
What was it? Did you tell what the percentages were?
Yeah, it was 45 Grenache, 35 Syrah, 25 Mourvedre.
Okay.
20. but you
20
got it.
math.
I mean, 105%
Nailed
would
it.
have been great
Okay.
too.
It's 105. So let's have a little old 900 Syrah, and we are going to do our very best to stick to our 630.
How are we doing on that, by the
feel
way?
like
It's 620.
I think we're drifting a
We're
bit
doing
here.
okay. We're doing
You
okay,
can
guys.
tell that
I-
we're not
I
spitting
see-
the wines.
Wines.
I see no reason to rush into this, however.
Yeah.
To rush out of it.
Out of it.
There you
either.
go.
Uh-huh,
Either
uh-huh,
one.
uh-huh.
All right, old 900.
Old 900.
Well, the story, I can tell the story about the old 900. The old 900 is in honor of my dad, who passed away in 2007, actually, the first harvest of our vineyard.
Yep.
He grew up in the panhandle of Texas in the Depression. There he is. He's the
There he is.
right-hand guy on the back row.
Yeah, he's the tall guy on the
little
right.
guy?
Yeah, I always think he looks like Clark Kent in an early
What?
Superman thing.
Yeah. How tall was Green? He was like 6'5" or something.
6'4", something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
At any rate,
Okay.
a man, a tough individual, let me tell you. But during the late 30s, he joined the Army Air Force to escape being a roofer in the panhandle of Texas in the Depression and the Dust Bowl, and ended up as a flight engineer on a B-29, which was a bomber that was based in the Pacific Ocean and was flying really, really long distances in order to bomb Japan in those days. And the name of the bomber was the old 900, which if you quizzed him about it, which I did once, he didn't talk about this much. I said, "Where'd you come up with that name?" It's actually named after the serial number of the
That is
bomber.
such a lame story.
I think, I'm kind of a nerd, and I think I know where it came from,
We gotta make up something different for just the old 900 of it
And
all.
well, I didn't believe him, but he left me with, I have all of his orders. I have his entire military history, which he saved. And sure enough, the old 900 is the name, that's the serial
So
number of that bomber.
funny.
But
No, I want like,
it's,
a lady on the front
yeah,
of the
yeah, it's
plane or
like a half
whatever.
naked lady with a,
No, serial number.
with a hatchet in her hand or something. I know. Well, anyhow, they flew 36 missions,
And came back.
came back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have a block on the vineyard. You saw the picture a moment ago, the old 900 block, we call it now. It's a specific clone. I got it from a guy named John Alban, who is possibly the very best grower, winemaker on the Central Coast, maybe in California. These were vines that came in. These are what is known as a suitcase clone. They came through customs, woven into a wreath as a gift for his mother, and somehow that passed through.
Because he was
Fine.
cheating. You're not supposed to just bring plant material from across the borders, and you gotta get creative. when
Anyhow,
you're breaking the
yeah,
law,
we
you
planted
know?
those there. They've prospered, and the wine is very different from the toasted slope across the land.
Yeah.
Year in
It
and year out.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true north facing that slope. And as you guys all know, we're obviously in the northern hemisphere. So south facing is going to be exposed to the sun all the time, and north facing is a little more protected. Syrah is a super cool grape because it's so versatile. I think that's kind of shot Syrah in the foot a little bit in the wider market, because when someone orders a Syrah, they don't always know what they're getting. A warm climate Syrah versus a cool climate Syrah are
Hugely
two
different.
completely different beasts.
Yeah.
And so I think that's hard for somebody, who says like they order a cab, they know what they're getting. They order a Pinot, they know what they're getting. They order a Syrah. Well, is it a warm climate or a cool climate?
Mm.
And it's
Yeah.
like, it just changes the perception of the grape. But it's so interesting here because even just these little microclimates of literally our old 900 is a north facing single clone. Toasted slope is on the other side of the road, the driveway pretty much, but it is south facing with two different clones and the expressions are totally different. And it's funny, I feel like learning the vineyard here and the wines, at first I had my initial ideas like, oh, toasted slope is always like the powerhouse. And then it was like every few years, like old 900 just comes in and dominates. And then back to toasted slope being like the bigger, richer wine. And then old 900 comes in. And so it's just so interesting. But one thing that I do find is that old 900 tends to have like a more savory characteristic to it. Like toasted slope to me is like this voluptuous woman, and it's olala berry pie and blackberry and like baking spices. It's just got all of this really like hedonistic characteristics. And then old 900 comes in and you get like this one, especially, it's got this like teriyaki beef jerky, this savory,
It's like
sanguine,
smoky, meaty thing.
meaty, yeah, and like olive tapenade, but then there's still like blueberry compote under there and like this rich flavors. So it's really fun wine and a cool expression.
So Toasted Slope is Scarlett Johansson and Old 900 is Hugh Hefner.
Totally.
Got it.
I love it.
Got it.
I love it. Maggie with her.
I'm gonna have to look up Scarlett Johansson. Otherwise, I totally agree on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
like Sofia Vergara.
Yeah.
That's what I think of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
in Kia, same place as Shakira. Anyway.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. But yeah, it's fun. And then one thing that's a little different is, so you guys are, if you're used to our wines, you notice that I usually put 1 or 2% Viognier into the blends. And that's co-fermented. But this has 4%. So we actually went a little heavier with the Viognier. And I think it just like, again, builds to the elegance of the vineyard and just creates this really like polished, smooth wine.
Yeah. And co-fermenting means we harvest the grapes on the same day. And so in the vineyard, they're in the same bin. So when they enter the building to ferment, there's a little bit of Viognier, so that white wine variety that we tasted earlier, sort of commingled with mostly Syrah, vast majority. And it's a small enough percentage, we could just not tell you it's in there, but we think it's a choice. There's intentionality behind
Yeah.
doing it. And it is similar to GSM. which is a very classic thing from the Rhone. We also stole the idea for co-fermentation from the Rhone Valley. Cote Rôtie, a really well-known Syrah village. A lot, I don't know if all of them, I don't know if it's the rules, but
Yeah, most
the
of
Viognier
the tea.
co-ferment is a big thing.
Yeah, and you get a little bit of that stone fruit and floral characteristics on this, like with the meaty savoriness. So it's like a cool little,
Yeah.
And the cheese goes great with it, by the way, if you have that cheese.
Yeah.
yeah.
So let's jump into Anne's block. So I anticipate we're going to go about 5 minutes over. We hope that you can stay forever, but of course, it won't hurt our feelings if you have to bail on time.
Sorry, we talked too much.
We do. It's too exciting. We get too excited. So this is our Anne's Block Petite Syrah. So Bob was just telling the story behind Old 900, the name of that wine in honor of his dad. Anne's Block is in honor of my mom's mom. So when we planted the vineyard, we bought this, bare piece of land in 2020 is wrong. No, yes, 2020. No.
03.
2003.
2003. Yeah,
2003.
Yeah.
We got there.
2003.
Yeah. And, we developed it from scratch, and there was a big party. We had a big party with our immediate family and very, very close friends, a handful of friends who are basically family. And the first vine on the vineyard was planted by Anne, who was an avid gardener, among other things.
Yep.
And so we've always called that one little, basically half acre of Petite Syrah Anne's Block. And the point at which we said, wait a minute, this is very good. We will bottle this. It had a name. We were going to call it Anne's Block on the label. And Bob, if you can talk briefly about why we planted Petite Syrah at all.
It goes back to prior to launching Alta Colina, I was a home winemaker. I made wine in my garage, and I sort of gleaned grapes from here and there and purchased some stuff from wine shops and this and that. And one of the things I was always struggling with was to get sufficient color into those garage wines. And along the way, I realized that Petite Syrah had incredible color available. So when we planted this vineyard, I committed a half an acre to Petite Syrah, and my thought was, if this Grenache doesn't have the color like all those other ones I had made, I'll just solve that problem with a little bit of Petite Syrah.
A handy little
handy dandy
backup.
And just to go back to the GSM for a moment, Molly was talking about maybe lighter in color and heavy on the tannin, which is certainly true, but on Alta Colina, it's not that light on the color actually. So we have never blended Petite Syrah in order to darken our Grenache. It just didn't need it. It worked out just fine. But the wine itself turned out to be just a miracle.
We dumb lucked into a really, really exceptional Petite Syrah. And Petite in the world, you can go to Trader Joe's and there are 6 Petite Syrahs. But I think high end, really beautifully made, balanced Petite Syrahs, there aren't actually that many. And we just happen to plant the right thing in the right place. And again, every once in a while we'll play around with blending it, but it's not because we need the color in the Grenache, as it turns out. But this is one that from the jump, we never planned on doing it, but here we are, and the result is really beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only unfortunate thing is that we only have these 2 small blocks of Petite Syrah. So that's why every year we only get around 120 cases, which means after Wine Club, we maybe have 20 cases available.
Maybe.
But really exciting because in 2023, the same year that we did the Picpoul, we did, literally like at Alta Colina, we have 135 acres, but only 31 are planted, but the rest of the land is not plantable. However, our vineyard manager, Daniel, was like, there's this one little swath next to the Petite Syrah.
It's tiny.
That if I plant them super high density and we hand farm it, meaning you can't get a tractor because the row in between it because the rows are too small. So it has to be weed whacked by hand multiple times a year.
We can't get our fancy mower in there.
You can't even get a quad in between the rows, for spraying. So instead everything is going to be done by hand, but he was like, but I think I can make enough so that you guys can get like another 50 cases of Anne's Block.
Yeah.
So we're hoping, it has not come online yet, but our goal is we should be able to eventually have enough to give you guys a little more often.
Ivy, put that picture back up there for a moment. I want to make a comment on that. Take a look at the picture on the right. This is a close-up of the high density planting, and contrast the cover crop.
I knew it. I knew that's where we were going.
I don't want to drag us back to soil too deeply here. Contrast that with other vineyards you may have observed around the world who are so concerned about the sterility of their surface cover. Isn't that
We're
beautiful?
very proud of the cover crop. Yeah, it's for us. The natural chaos is really a thing of beauty in our minds. You will see vineyards where
Yeah.
it's, you know, this lush green vines and it's gorgeous, but if you sort of zoom your eyes out and you just look, like there's nothing else growing, only vines, and that is not our approach.
Yeah, that was extremely lush. And then those California poppies in there,
Beautiful.
delightful.
Beautiful. So as you're sipping on this Petite Syrah, again, you are able to customize your shipments to whatever you'd like. So you can log in to your member profile and adjust those shipments. We've put together selections for all of you that if you choose to not change anything, you're going to get a really nice sort of representative range of wines. But this is a great opportunity to rearrange the shipments to whatever your favorites are. And it's a really good opportunity to add on some favorites. So things like that Petite Syrah that will more or less be sold out at release, put extra in there right now because it will go away. You guys, we forgot.
We haven't forgotten.
Bonus.
Molly's working it.
Mom is sitting over there. That's my mother. So we just wanted to have a little toast at the end. And earlier today, we were like, we're going to want champagne at the end. So we realized you do not have this in your classes, but it is a thing that you could add on if you wanted to. So we're going to just have a little cheers and thank you with our Lynn's Cuvee, which is a champagne style sparkling. Champagne is a huge pain in the ass. It's a really involved process. And Molly did all of it in-house, which is actually a big deal because it takes special equipment and it's a whole thing.
Go over there, Lynn.
Oh, Mom's
No,
6
over there.
months
Oh, okay.
sticking her head in.
Scoot over.
Oh, we're rotating.
All right.
We're rotating.
All right.
So one of the cool things is the label. There we go.
Perfect.
There we go. So the story on the label, my parents are from a very small town in New Mexico called Gallup. They have known each other since 7th grade, which is wild.
A long time ago.
No.
They still like each other, which is also wild. It's a joy. And among the things that my mother required, you know, my dad was requested. You know, Dad made wine at home for years. And the point at which we were able to really consider, like, okay, we can do this for real. We can buy land, plant vineyard, do this properly. Mom said, great, I am on board if you make champagne at some point. And so Bob didn't for about 15 years.
Took me a while working on it.
But then he thought, you know, a really good time to do this was for their 50th wedding anniversary, which was in 2019. So in 2018, we made our first vintage of Lynn's Cuvee, and the label it's the silhouette of a vase. So it also looks like the ghost emoji. That is a coincidence. But if you imagine there's sort of a handle and then 2 spouts.
It's a Navajo wedding vase is
Yeah.
what it is.
So it's a very traditional
Yeah.
sort of, I don't know. I can't think of the word. It has a lot of meaning behind it. And it's very much a reflection of where they grew up. And so it's a special thing.
Indeed.
Yes.
So cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah.
You guys, thank you so much. It's
Yeah.
been lovely.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Squeeze in here.
I got you. I'll just
Squeeze
make
in
it. You
there.
don't need to scoot.
Get in
I'm
here.
good.
Can do
We
his.
love doing these with all of you. And again, as long as y'all want to do them, we want to do them with you. We really appreciate your time and spending your evening with us, a portion of your evening. We're really thrilled with these new wines. We hope that this got you extra excited as well. And Ivy is the man. She's the one for
The man. All right.
Yeah.
Love it.
when it comes to any questions. You know, if you're like, the software is being stupid, just you can email any of us, text.
Ivy, you got anything you want to pop in here with?
You know it. You guys have about a week, less than a week, about 5 days before we release to everyone else. And that's code for you can add anything to your cart you want. Someone in particular on this call requested, actually, he sent a very nice email to all of us saying that he had had a 2016 old 900 recently. So we went and found the last 2 cases of that in Bob's library. It's up on the online until it runs out, which sometimes that's like tomorrow at noon. So add it while you can. There's Lynn's Cuvee. There is the GSM, the 21 GSM that Molly mentioned. There's the Sun Worshipper, most recent mention of Sun Worshipper and Toasted Slope. I think we have a few cases left of each of those.
You might be out of time.
Maybe we're out of Toasted Slope. I'll double check that. And then someone always sends me a note immediately following this. What about Pet Nat and Rosé? They are available to add on if you'd like them. We also have a brand new, really fancy subscription where if you like those wines, you can get them regularly. It's complimentary shipping. If you want more details on that, let me know. I would love for you to be a guinea pig to just test it all out for me. It's a brand new thing. And any other wine that you like, if you had a vintage or something in particular 6 months ago and you want to see if we have more, just send me a note. I'm always happy to help you guys all. Everyone here, I think, knows me pretty well. You know where to find me via text. You can call me. It rings to my cell phone. If I have a 2-year-old in the background, you'll just have to have a little grace. But yeah, send me a note and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And I'm really happy to help. So don't feel like you're bugging me. I live for this week. So yeah, thanks for joining us. And like Maggie said, as long as we order the amount of kits, tasting kits through our partners, Master of the World, that we were able to sell the last time. So you guys have kept this going. I don't know anyone else in Paso that still does virtual tastings. And we do it because you guys love it. And so thank you for your commitment to this. And it always makes our spring. So thank you so much.
Indeed.
Thank you guys. Yeah.
And I hope you all realize how great Ivy is too. She is an awesome individual.
She holds us
Yeah,
together.
takes care of all of you. Yeah.
That's true.
Well, thank you. I love doing this. So yeah, I'll touch base. I'm going to send everyone a text tomorrow, and just so you have my number if you have any questions. And yeah, we're happy to help. And thank you. What your support means a lot. These are some crazy times we're in, and just seeing all your faces tonight made me feel really grateful. So thank you so much.
And
Okay, guys.
we got some questions or anything, Ivy?
Yeah, we'll hang out for a few minutes if folks want to come off mute.
We actually don't have any questions. Anyone want to come off mute?
I think we explained that soil so well that no one had any questions.
Oh, goodness. Okay, I guess we're good. You guys send us a note if you have any GT questions. Bob will send you a voice note back, won't you, Bob?
And if you took any pictures, tag us.
Yeah.
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 Alta
Yes.
Colina. We
Yes.
always love
Oh,
to-
and thank you for the kind notes on Emily's pairings too. A few people sent me a note. I'm going to pass all that feedback along to her. She's so talented. Every time she comes up with these, I'm like, huh, interesting. Like the pickled blueberries were that for me this time. Last time it was the seaweed pairing. I was like, I don't know. But every time I taste it, it's just so good. So I'm glad you guys enjoy them.
Yeah.
I'll pass all that along. Okay.
Thank you all.
Happy club shipment. Happy adding on. Let us know if you need anything.
Cheers.
Cheers,
Enjoy.
everybody.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.